let's say I partake in an interview. I'm describing Indonesia in a very point blank manner and my experiences. And the piece comes out and suddenly there's just so much unnecessary floweriness that comes around it. Like her visit to Indonesia, the island of gods, like, oh, the tropics, oh, the spice island that sits atop the Pacific Ring of Fire. And it's like, I get it. My country is so beautiful. Yeah, I get it. But is it really necessary to portray us as this, exotic tropical land like that? Is it necessary to bring those kind of adjectives to make us in the same kind of level of validity as like other countries, for example?
Everybody, welcome to Eastern Honey Season 2. Woo! Today we have a very distinguished, established, and gorgeous guest.
Oh, wow.
Rahel Stephanie, welcome to the pod.
Thank you for having me. Very happy to be here.
As per tradition, Mel, would you like to open with a bio?
Yes. Rahel, you can shift uncomfortably as we sing your praises. Rahel Stephanie is the founder of the acclaimed supper club Spoons, dedicated to bringing authentic Indonesian cuisine to the global stage. Recognized as one of the most exciting voices in food today, from sellout events to a national rollout with Wagamama, Rahel has partnered with brands like Gani, appeared regularly on Sunday Brunch, and was named Chef to Watch by British Vogue. Rahel's work blends creativity with an unwavering mission to educate people about the rich, diverse culinary heritage of Indonesia. Most recently, Rahel was invited to be a guest of MasterChef UK. In addition to her culinary achievements, Rahel's presence on NTS radio showcases her ability to curate culture beyond the plate, making her a multidisciplinary force in the worlds of food, music, and lifestyle. As of 2025, Rahel continues to captivate audiences, solidifying her place as a leading figure in the global supper club and creative scene. Rahel Stephanie, welcome to Eastern Honeys!
Thank you. That was pretty overwhelming. Thank you. Very comprehensive introduction. Thank you.
So, in your own words, please could you introduce yourself?
Yeah, I mean, you just about covered it. But yeah, for sure. I think, as you kind of mentioned, I guess my practice or my work per se covers predominantly food and cuisine, but eventually the evolution of it kind of covers a lot of other mediums as well. Whatever comes my way, which is, I guess, also just a reflection of the multitude of interests that I have, / ADHD. But yeah, I think what ties or binds it all together really is just the main and primary motivation, spreading the awareness and gaining the respect that my heritage, Indonesian culture deserves.
Yes.
And it's very much underrated, not just not respected enough, but barely spoken about or known of. That's a little bit of an intro, I guess.
Love it. We definitely know a thing or two about marginalized cultures.
Oh, yeah.
And we really resonate with everything you're doing.
Oh, thank you, guys.
So when we first met many moons ago, many personas ago, you were working in a day job.
Yes, correct.
What made you pursue restauranting or like cooking, spoons, full time?
Honestly, oh God, like if we ran it back 10 years ago, I would have, or even like all my life, I would have never imagined myself where I am today working in food or just the hospitality industry in general. It was kind of random because, I came here to study and then I was working like several different kinds of day jobs, wasn't happy in any of them. But at one point when I was in one of those day jobs, I was always kind of into cooking. Well, more so I was into eating. And then there was cooking because I couldn't get the Indonesian food around here that I missed so dearly. So I started cooking for myself and my friends around me and realizing a lot of people had no idea what Indonesian food was. I kind of did that pretty frequently. And at one point, a friend of mine, Nicole, actually, who you've had on the show, she introduced me to the idea of supper clubs. And this was kind of in the midst of everyone just being like, oh my God, you should open a restaurant. And I'm just like, yeah, because it's so easy and I have so much money to open one, right? So when Nicole introduced to me the concept of supper clubs, which is essentially ticketed dinner parties, I thought that was a pretty cute way of, getting even more people under one roof and kind of feeding them like I had been in smaller circles. And so I kind of kickstarted that at the end of 2019, super casually, just like as a little was a little side project, not even a project, it was just like a reason to get people over together and to introduce Indonesian food. That went successfully, did another one and another one. And then we were tied into lockdown. I couldn't continue doing the events and kind of converted into these home delivery meal boxes, which kind of started out to raise funds for the NHS in the beginning of the pandemic. And then that did well. So I continued doing that. And simultaneously, I got put on furlough in my work. So I was like, hell yeah, I'm just going to continue doing this.
I am so jealous of people who got furlough.
I know.
Oh my God.
It was a silver lining. It was like anxiety ridden, but like it was a blessing in disguise, because that, like during the pandemic, was probably where I had most of the most impactful organic word of mouth that kind of spread through kind of like networks and circles about the food I was doing. And so when London opened back up from the lockdown, people were really excited to attend events and stuff. And so people were excited to experience, the food, I guess, that they've heard about or they had ordered over the pandemic in like an IRL context. So yeah, that was super organic and kind of almost quite accidental. Eventually, maybe a year or two later, I don't really remember the timeline, I hated my job enough, and spoons grew to a point where I was confident enough to take the risk to quit my full-time job and pursue it full-time. And here I am.
Good for you. Yeah. That's great. Yeah. For having the confidence to let go for it.
It was crazy because I remember putting in my notice at my last job, and in the exit interviews or even just in casual conversations with colleagues, they were talking about like, oh yeah, it's so brave of you. So brave. But if one thing or another like crops up, you can always fall back into this if you wanted to. And I'm like, geez, thanks for the confidence, guys.
Yeah. That's so English. We're like, if it all goes tits up, we'll be.
You try your cute thing over there,
So you were like, I'm going to dive straight in.
Yeah.
And to that point, what is it that you love so much about Indonesian food, and zooming out, just culture in general, that makes you want to share?
Well, there's a lot that I love about it, but when we speak about what I want to share about it, I think it's important to get back to the roots of why I did what I did. And I would have to be transparent and say that a lot of what I did when I started taking it more seriously was driven from a lot of just like anger and frustration.
Yeah.
Like what kind of stemmed in the beginning as, like this excitement to share kind of started evolving into this thing where I'm realizing more and more about, the misrepresentations of it in, the high street and the mainstream, and just the drive to correct those misinterpretations amongst not just the general public, but even with friends. So there's a little bit of a kind of like bittersweet dynamic in those realms. Hand in hand with that is just how vast and how complex the heritage is, and how much is left to be discovered by people in the West specifically. And I feel like a lot of marginalized cultures are viewed through such a one-dimensional lens, that kind of like Western gaze into the global South. And that's something that I'm striving to push forward, even with myself specifically, when I'm representing my own culture.
And when you say when you're representing your own culture, we've spoke about off-pod about self-exoticization.
Absolutely. That's something I'm like super, super passionate about, and something I'm actively exploring and trying to integrate into my relationship with my cultural identity as well. Because I feel like there's a lot of evolution and growth in my relationship with my heritage. Even from, when I was Indonesian, when I moved to London, there's that stark difference in how my relationship with my culture was. It went from, I guess I took a lot of things for granted coming from where I come from, and then coming here as, the diaspora, and then starting to have that gaze of being like, oh my God, that absence makes the heart grow fonder, and like trying to spread awareness about that. But then it's now come from there where I'm trying to spread awareness about my culture and, really trying to define the Indonesian culture to people around me, to something about wanting to have more nuanced conversations about it. Like not just explaining to people what Indonesia is about, because I feel like when representing a culture in those realms, it's so easy to have such a superficial definition, a superficial way of defining what that is. A lot of diasporic representation, I feel, kind of caters a lot to the Western gaze, which I know is quite natural, I guess, in a way, because we're existing in this Western space. You know, you're trying to define your culture to people here. But equally, I think when that's done extensively, a lot of opportunities are missed, or there is a lack of acknowledgement in the nuances of, you know, certain cultures, like marginalized cultures. I have to check on myself quite often the way that I'm portraying my heritage. And I think I've had almost the privilege of, you know, going back to Indonesia quite often and having a lot of my friends local to Indonesia check up on me as well. And, you know, like, hey, the way you're viewing our culture is very diaspora pilled, actually, in a way that, like, you know, people in Indonesia themselves, they wouldn't be having these conversations about our culture the way people here are, which again is a natural of being because of the geographic differences. But also I think it's time to evolve from that into something that also acknowledges the nuances and the ways of being of people who are living there now, you know. An example, I guess, is a lot of food media focuses on food as a medium of nostalgia, like nostalgic storytelling, or, you know, like, oh, this dish reminds me of home. But then it ends there. And then what, you know? There's so much more to what that food's about, what people's relationship with those dishes are today. Like, it's not all just about traditional practices and ceremonial practices, like cultural ceremonies and stuff like that, because there is an evolving force that's going in how people live there today. And I think those are conversations that should be had too.
Wow. Yeah. We were having a chat with a Filipino chef earlier, and he basically made the point that you can't have one thing without the other. It requires the context, the cultural context, the colonial context, absolutely everything to really start to engage in these nuanced conversations.
Of course, absolutely. Which is why I'm saying it's like neither is wrong, but I feel like most of the conversations being had are just that. And I'd love to see the start of an evolution to have more nuanced conversations. Because, we can have all of these conversations, not just this.
I think that's something we're really intrigued about from a Filipino standpoint, because obviously, like, we are diasporic lens, and the layers of migration and sacrifice and whatever else means that we have a British tint to everything we look at now. Ooh. The news is, like, Michelin is for the first time entering the Philippines this year. So it's like, how will that Western sign of approval and validation affect that conversation in the global South, in the region itself, like outside of being in the West? That's when a lot of more interesting things to talk about and interrogate will crop up. Generally, you're incredibly unapologetic in your kind of mission to tell people what's good about your culture, which we love. We loved watching your recent clip on TV where you're like, guys, do you know what satay actually is? And everyone was flabbergasted. And so obviously moving here from Indonesia, like, food is just so white male coded.
Yeah.
So can you share some experiences you've had navigating that?
I still have a lot of imposter syndrome for sure. Like, one being a woman in a white male dominated space, like a woman of color in a white male dominated space. And beyond that also because I didn't come from a traditional culinary training background either. So navigating that takes a lot of work within myself as well, you know, because as, you know, unapologetic as I make myself out to be, sometimes, you know, I'm human as well, and I'm navigating those spaces. But that's kind of like in a kitchen context. Thankfully, like, everyone that I've had the pleasure of working with has been very generous and very, you know, accommodating. And there are a lot of, especially women in the hospitality industry, who I owe a lot of thanks to because they've been so generous with, like, a knowledge exchange. But beyond the kitchen environment, I feel like there's a certain portrayal that is kind of enforced upon me within media from time to time. Not always, but this has definitely cropped up, in which they put me in a box as a woman of color in food that's quite domesticating in a way. Like they assume quite a maternal character for me, which I don't necessarily agree with. I think it's great. And I love that it's part of a lot of people's narratives and stories. But I didn't grow up with my mom cooking at home. I didn't grow up with my grandma cooking at home. You know, food was always around, but my relationship with food wasn't so much a maternal one. And neither would I consider myself like a maternal force in the kitchen.
Right. Right, like the auntie with the...
Like, I like the concept of being an auntie for sure. Yeah, I love that. And I like play into that as well. But that's my choice to make, you know. I don't want you assuming that for me.
That is really interesting about like that perception of like auntie in the kitchen and stuff. Because I think you being you're the almost like the antithesis of that. You're reclaiming it and making it your own, which is so refreshing.
Exactly. It's very tongue in cheek, and it's very kind of like reclaiming that whole idea and narrative as opposed to actually being here to cater to men in a way.
Say it. The patriarchy.
Yeah. And also like, because that concept of auntie is almost steeped in subservience.
Yes, exactly.
Servitude.
Yeah, absolutely.
But by virtue of us reshaping the narrative by just unapologetically being ourselves is in turn like dismantling that.
Yeah.
Agreed. Yeah, absolutely.
I feel like the domesticated Southeast Asian woman is such a hangover from like wartime stories and like way back when with like, you know, the seductress, the temptress, whereas the domesticated woman in the kitchen, the auntie, is like so palatable and non-threatening.
Brings us back to the whole exoticization of it all as well. And I think it's such a wide topic to kind of interrogate because it goes everywhere. Basically, you know, the Southeast Asian woman as like a fiery woman, and that's seen through like a sexual lens, or like, a Southeast Asian woman as like this domesticated housewife. And again, that all caters to the same kind of like almost cis male gaze.
Yeah. There was this horrific article or like short story published by a guy who traveled the Philippines, and he was like, this is a fictional piece, and it was about him having a wild fling with this like wild Filipina from the province. And it was just like,
I remember you telling me this.
Are you joking? And it got taken down by like the Australian magazine after complaint. Yeah. It was like, why did it take a whole demographic complaining for you to see what is so obviously like just a stereotype, like a trope that should be left in 1986?
Precisely.
But hey.
So, well, Gordon Ramsay actually recently visited the Philippines and described Filipino cuisine as, quote, the sleeping beauty of Asia.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
I mean,
what are your thoughts on like the way food is sensationalized, especially when celebrated by Western chefs?
Yeah.
Also, like, just to disclaimer, like, it's fine. Like,
we like Gordon Ramsay. Fine.
Yeah, we like Gordon Ramsay.
Yeah.
We like Gordon Ramsay. It's really interesting you brought that up, because in parallel to that, like, I think I've experienced, again, not often, but it crops up. Just let's say I partake in an interview and, you know, I'm describing Indonesia in a very point blank manner and my experiences in a very like point blank way. And the piece comes out and suddenly there's just so much unnecessary floweriness that comes around it. Like, oh, her visit to Indonesia, the island of gods. Like, oh, the tropics. Oh, the spice island that sits atop the Pacific Ring of Fire. And it's like, like, you know, I get it. My country is so beautiful. Yeah, I get it. But is it really necessary to portray us as this, you know, exotic tropical land like that? Like, I don't think that's so besides the point of a lot of the times these pieces are trying to interrogate the main substance of the article. I'm just like, why is it necessary to bring in all of this kind of like accentuated floweriness and exaggerations? Just, is it necessary to bring those kind of adjectives to make us in the same kind of level of validity as like other countries, for example? Like, I would hope eventually when conversations are had amongst like about marginalized cultures like, you know, Indonesia or the Philippines, that, for example, let's say French cuisine often described as elegant, sophisticated. Japanese cuisine culture, precise, very meticulous. And then when it comes to like Indonesian cuisine, for example, fiery, adventurous kind of thing.
What's in the banana leaf?
Banana leaves, exotic,
Extremely true.
That's so, I feel like it takes out a lot of the acknowledgements on how nuanced those cultures can be.
I do feel like context matters in that regard, because my background is like travel and culture journalism.
Sure.
And so many like media outlets require that kind of fluff in order to provide an access point.
Because that caters to the white gaze.
Exactly.
The Western gaze.
Whereas if you actually put writers of the places you're talking about and not some guy named like Chris, who is the Asia expert, then you start to get a much more nuanced take.
Precisely.
And that actually strips away the fluff and goes into the heart of what something is.
Precisely. Because, all that, fluff. And I mean, there is space for that for sure, because that storytelling is still rightfully there. It is a very beautiful country, and like some people might not know that. Fair enough. But also what ends up the island of gods. But what then becomes ignored, or what then gets shelved away, is the fact that Indonesia is still an evolving place with people who live there presently and don't just live in villages,
This romanticized.
When they're like, do you have Wi-Fi there?
Literally, it's giving we don't have Wi-Fi,
Yeah.
Whereas, people like myself, like my friends, my family who are there, we live real lives there.
Oh.
We live like real evolving lives that are so interesting. And I think that's another story to be told as well. And it's an important story to be told.
You mentioned struggling sometimes with subconscious self-exoticization. And so in Anna Sulanma Singh's brand new book, Plug, Chinese and Any Other Asian, you're quoted as saying, "It is always white men who seem most entitled to appropriate marginalized cuisines, exoticize its women, and romanticize its working class while they're at it. Due to wider systemic influences, subconscious self-exoticization is something I still struggle with. When I'm presenting myself and my cultural identity with pride, I often wonder to what extent will my actions be perceived by the Eurocentric eye as exotic due to my own choices." So we kind of touched on that, but we'd love to know some examples of how this relationship might manifest personally and professionally.
I think a very simple example that is probably commonly experienced by a lot of people of the diaspora as well. And this is just a very simple kind of example, is, I guess, taking elements of our traditional fashion, for example, taking like jewelry and then just using that here as a point to kind of prove your identity kind of thing, which is cute and stuff. But I mean, that also, again, shelves a lot of like cultural significance of those like elements.
Right.
And like, why are you doing that exactly? Are you doing that for yourself, or are you doing that for the Western gaze? And in that realm, you're technically exoticizing yourself,
Oh!
Am I exotic? I question this. That's why it's something that I ask myself, and I double take and triple take myself like every day. I'm just like,
But
who am I
it's
doing?
so hard to constantly
It's hard.
asterisk yourself.
Absolutely. It is hard, but I think it's a necessary thing to do.
I think that's also interesting because I've had experiences where, like, being in Manila or something, I've heard friends say to other friends, "Why are you dressed like a British person or something?"
Yeah. Okay.
And I think, for example, here, we love to rep Philippine culture because there's a lot of like Philippine-owned brands and ESEA brands we love to put on, but also because these touch points make us feel connected.
Sure.
But then, over there, it's like, why are you wearing a beret? Are you French?
Precisely.
And it's like, context matters, and asking the question is really important.
Yeah, of course. Exactly. But I think with that as well, I think that's why, as I touched a little bit earlier, when you're taking mediums from your culture over here, a lot of it is always used as kind of like a connection to like a storytelling about home, a connection to home kind of thing. But then from there, where do we go? I feel like it can be a much more nuanced conversation once again,
Deeper one.
and a deeper one, because, be it food media, fashion, anything, music, and I've been guilty of this many times myself, which is why it's still like an active thing that I ask myself is, where do we go from I miss home? Or where do we go from this is a connection to my heritage kind of thing, like having more complex conversations about those connections specifically.
This is something we really get from your branding, because your branding feels really authentic to you as a person.
Yeah.
And it's not the batik print and the, etc. It's like, this is me, this is my vibe, and like, this is what I'm doing. Precisely. And it's very, this is me.
Exactly. And I think that can apply to everyone of the diaspora, like to make, it's great that, we're so proud of our culture and our heritage, but there's so much more to us than the flag of our nation.
Yeah.
And that brings me to, what Anna talks a lot about her book as well, just the homogenization of Asian culture. Because just because we all come from the same heritage, and that's cool and stuff, and I love having my community around me, we've all got different stories to tell. There's no one experience for the whole diaspora.
So in a space where diasporic representation often caters to stereotypes, how do you portray like authentic Indonesian flavors in spoons?
With authenticity in food, I think I'm mistaken a lot as someone who's against kind of like contemporary incarnations of traditional dishes, which is completely untrue. And I think that stems from the fact that I am extremely unapologetic when it comes to cultural and historical context, because contemporary representation without those contexts can be disrespectful. That being said, I don't cook completely traditional foods, It's like I verge towards like the contemporary end of things sometimes. And when I do that, and I also have done a lot of collaborations that fuse, Indonesian food with like other cuisines, for example. But then with that, like I make sure to always give credit where credit's due to where those foods come from specifically, as well as the stories those foods have to tell. For example, which region in Indonesia this came from, how it's traditionally served. Because not just from like an angle of respect, but I feel like when I'm creating incarnations of traditional dishes in a place where not enough is known about my cuisine, then that just gets lost, If I'm creating like, I don't know, my own spin on a very niche traditional dish and everyone's just like, what's that like, and this is the person's first experience with Indonesian food, they don't know what that original dish is meant to taste like. So that might be their first kind of instance of encountering that food, and they might assume that that's how it's traditionally supposed to be eaten when it's not. So it's a lot about just dialogues and conversations, and that's something I'm navigating as well.
With introducing people to Indonesian cuisine, what like 3 dishes would you give to someone who has never had any kind of touch points with it, to give some sense of the vastness and complexity of it?
That's so difficult because Indonesia is just such a big country with like over 300 different ethnicities, like thousands and thousands of islands. And naturally that diversity is reflected in the cuisine as well. So I always struggle when, someone asks me like, what is Indonesian food?
Yeah.
What is Indonesian food? Yeah. And I'm just like, where do I start? I don't know. I can do it in 3, but
5.
Take up the space. Have 8.
Take us through a journey of Indonesia.
Like with my menus, for example, I always try, and because I don't specialize in one specific region or the other. And, like I said, the motivation to my practice is to raise awareness and to communicate and portray Indonesia as like, this diverse, vast country and reclaim that respect. So through the menus, and which is usually like, not large menus, but still like enough of a sampler menu, I try and reflect as much of a diversity as I can from it. So for example, we might have one dish that's Javanese, one dish from West Sumatra, one dish from North Sumatra, one dish from Bali, one dish from like Sulawesi or something. And from each of those different regions, I think that can portray really well, to the best I can from a tiny menu, the diversity and the complexities in our cuisines, and how even while wildly different from one another, still merge together quite harmoniously. So I don't know. Do you want me to go through specific examples?
Do you know what? Like in some of these questions that we've had with like guests, when we were like, can you, for example, on another episode we had with a Filipino chef, we were like, can you describe Filipino food in like a sentence? And he was like, respectfully, in short, he was like, respectfully, no.
No, precisely.
Yeah. And it's really refreshing. Like,
we were saying the PR machine requires sound bites.
Yeah.
They require the angle.
Exactly.
And sometimes it just doesn't
more.
It does more harm than good.
Yeah, precisely. It becomes very reductive in those realms, for sure. I'm not saying that everyone who specializes or takes an interest in Indonesian culture or cuisine or anything needs to do it the same way I do it, but this is my schlick. And I love doing this. And I also just love yapping about it.
Yeah, no, it's great. It's refreshing.
What are the I would just love to know how it feels for you to go onto like a live TV set, for example, and like throw down some facts and everyone's like flummoxed and speechless. How does that feel for you? Are you like ready and waiting to hear follow-up questions? Is it quite nice to experience them actually feeling some profound shift in their understanding, like the cogs turning as you tell them these things?
I think when I'm given that opportunity to talk about my culture to people who don't know much about my culture, I will take that space.
Yes, take it.
And it's less a conversation and more about me schooling you. Yeah. For sure. In those spaces. Unlike today where we're having a conversation, obviously. Yeah. But when in the context of like what you're talking about in like, you know, TV or whatever, I'm just like, I'm here to spill the tea.
Yeah. The cameraman pans around and everyone's like,
it's like, I will continue speaking until my time on air is up. I'm not asking questions to you.
Yeah. That's the energy we need.
I know, honestly. I'm like, damn, I'm getting like, educated. Not only that, but I think getting the confidence is like, wow, I need a confidence pill. So speaking upon like being in these like, I guess like more Western white spaces, you have collaborated with Wagamamas.
Yeah.
Which sparks a lot of debate within Asian communities in the UK. Speaking personally, you're not gonna lie, it hits. Can you tell us like some more about that? Totally. How that came about?
So, you know, my mission from the beginning of, you know, my practice and my work is to spread awareness about Indonesian cuisine, to get the word out there, to share Indonesian food with as many people as possible. And I've done that, you know, from small circles, from friends, and then close to friends of friends, and then like the wider public. And the Wagamama opportunity to me was just such a great way to reach mass audiences and for Indonesian food to really get out there. And it's, you know, now it's nationwide in the UK and the US, and I wouldn't have dreamed of that.
Your face on every menu every.
So crazy.
I was in Heathrow. My partner's mixed Japanese, had never been to Wagamama.
Oh my god!
And saw your face in the corner. I was like, she's amazing. She's Indonesian.
But we love to see it because we're also Southeast Asian. So I'm like, oh.
Precisely. Yeah, no, precisely. And I think on those, in those terms as well, like, because I didn't grow up here, obviously, and I spoke to a lot of my friends who did, and their relationship with Wagamama. And interestingly, Wagamama was an introduction to Asian cuisine to a lot of people. And I think a lot of people have a little bit of a sentimental connection to it, like whether or not you rate it, you know? And so it's cute to have an Indonesian item there to something that holds like a certain space in people's kind of like hearts.
Yeah.
And with that, I think I'm really proud of the dish.
Yeah. Good. What was it like collaborating with an institutional restaurant? Like, what was the process of being like, this is the dish that will hit the most with your demographic?
So Wagamama were being really cool with the partnership. They very much gave me a lot of creative freedom to what I wanted to manifest in the menu, with the only limits being logistics, you know, and access to ingredients. So it was all down to me. And the first thing I thought was, okay, obviously it has to be Indonesian. And second of all, I was like, what does everyone love? Like fried chicken. So like, everyone loves fried chicken. And then we've got that dish from Indonesia called ayam geprek, which is like battered fried chicken smashed onto sambal normally, or like a spicy relish served with rice. And that was kind of the basis of it. Yeah, like smashed so that the chicken itself, there's more surface area and the kind of like relish seeps through the crevices of the chicken better to allow for like maximum flavor absorption.
Yes, flavor absorption.
Flavor. That is so good. And we've got that served with coconut rice and some turmeric pickled vegetables. And yeah.
What sort of stuff do you normally like just cook at home day to day?
I don't really cook that much for myself. Especially since, I don't know, and this is, oh my God, I think it must be for the past 3 years. It's been like a New Year's resolution of mine is to kind of like the past 3 years. I'm being honest here with myself, to kind of revisit that romantic relationship with cooking for myself, which I've been lagging a lot since working in food.
I feel like that's a very common thing with chefs.
Yeah, look at most chefs' fridges. It's usually empty.
It's like leftovers or like a Morrison's pack of donuts. Yeah.
Exactly. Because I mean, when you're cooking so much, for myself at least, it's like the last thing I want to do usually is to cook for myself at home, which I'm trying to shift as well. But I love eating out. Yeah, I love eating out. I love food being cooked for me. And honestly, cooking for me is very underrated.
Plug.
Just FYI. I'm so dead.
No, but I really resonate with that because, again, a prevalent theme within the podcast is we have so many creatives on here, like chefs, like people working in, I'm blanking right now, and when it starts for a love of the thing, right? And when you seek to make it out as a profession or a career, slowly that gets stripped away
because it's the business.
Yeah, precisely. And I think that applies to a lot of hobbies that have, become monetized.
Yeah. Yeah. The girl boss era.
Literally just out here trying to have a hobby I'm not monetizing, you know what I mean?
But then when like bringing it back to what you were saying about being very cognizant of self-exoticization, but also commodification, because you have commercial purposes to sustain a financial business, right? Yeah. Like, is it difficult walking that line if you're developing a menu, for example, and being like, what's going to hit with people, what's not? Or are you now like at the point where you're like, I'm going to do this and I think people are going to respond? Because
I've had the privilege, I think, for working like the latter, for sure. Or at least, I don't say yes to every opportunity that comes my way. I have had the privilege of doing that. And when it's the right fit or the right partnership, it's normally the case where they hire me for me and they know my principles. Mm-hmm. And so far, I haven't had the unfortunate arrangement of having let those kind of clients dictate how I portray myself.
That is a privilege.
Yeah.
Amazing.
It's honestly been fantastic. Yeah.
Do you think it's because you have such a like strong anchoring in actually being born and raised in Indonesia, then coming here, that maybe you have more confidence and like boundaries, whereas a lot of people from the diaspora who were like born and raised here, for example, have felt more marginalized because they don't have that strong connection. And so there's more of a willingness to just say yes to everything just to get some kind of blend.
Of course. Yeah. I can't speak for other people, obviously, but I have spoken about this and that, while I'm extremely unapologetic about what I do, it's in no way medium to discredit, for example, like takeout businesses over here, because those are run by people who have had to migrate over and make a living out of catering to the public. Yeah. And I completely understand why a lot of these takeaways or a lot of these food businesses were opened up as like Pan-Asian restaurants. Mm-hmm. They're trying to make ends meet. Yeah. A lot of them didn't choose to work in food, but that was a way that they could sustain themselves. So it's in no shade at all to any of that. I'm having these conversations to push for my practice in that way. But whenever I'm unapologetic, it's not to throw people of the community under the bus. It's to retaliate against the white voices. When I'm trying to encourage more nuanced conversations as well, I mean that in an encouraging way, not in a kind of like, you're doing it wrong kind of way, you know? But
as a healthy challenge.
Exactly. Precisely.
But how do you remain so unapologetic? And where does the confidence come from?
My genes?
From the gods?
I'm not sure. I think it's definitely a personality thing. I don't think I'm a very demure person. I'm not a very reserved person. I'm quite forthright by nature. And I think that has helped a lot. Which is why I'm quite comfortable with like being out here and like speaking out about things. And then obviously there's a lot of motivation, you know, like how I've spoken about like, you know, my mission and what I'm trying to raise awareness about. And I encourage other people to kind of partake in that if they'd like to, you know, the responsibility doesn't fall on us, you know, it's like the responsibility falls on people in the Western worlds to have that curiosity and that, you know, accountability when taking or partaking in other people's cultures, to give that respect. We're just here to facilitate that. I'm here to facilitate that, you know, but it shouldn't come as an obligated labor to us.
Oh my God, so true. Because for a long time, I felt like I was very like, in full-time working spaces, especially like Caucasian dominated spaces, I felt the need to be that person to like educate people.
Yeah, absolutely. Like obviously, unfortunately, we are the ones having to initiate those conversations because they're not going to think about it. But at the end of the day, it would be incredible. Like the ideal dream is for it not to have to be us, right? Like it means a lot when my white friends kind of like speak up for it first, for example.
Yeah.
I think that's really valuable.
What advice would you give to chefs of colour in the diaspora outside of their home country who have found themselves playing into stereotypes and kind of feel stuck or trapped?
What do you mean by stereotypes?
I suppose just when they realise that they've been catering too much to this Western lens or Western gaze, and what are some kind of, for example, what is your North Star or parameters for, I'm not going to do that job because it sounds like you want me to do this and be performative in this way. How can someone approach it in the same way? Have that confidence, I suppose.
I think the most important thing to me is the integrity, for sure. And I understand, again, that comes from a place of privilege to have that integrity, because sometimes we're just out here trying to make ends meet and no judgments there. But if you'd like to, and if you choose to kind of have that integrity, then to the best of your ability, just be unapologetic about, you know, your culture and your heritage, and always question, like how we've spoken about in this conversation several times, keep questioning yourself. Who are you doing this for? Is it for yourself or is it for the Western gaze? I think that's my North Star.
And also like unapologeticness. Whilst it may mean something to you, it means something different to the individual.
Precisely.
So it's like taking up the space means different to everyone. So like make it work for you, I guess. Is my answer to the question I wasn't asked.
Take up the space. Precisely.
So like to close, 2 questions. First one being, the Filipino community is, I guess, like quite small in London. Small, but not small. And we really love, there's just such a bond around Filipino-ness in London, which is such a gift. And the Indonesian community is also equally quite small.
Potentially smaller.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. What do you love about being a part of that community in London?
It's an interesting one because before I started cooking, I barely knew any Indonesians here. And then I started cooking and doing these like pop-ups and supper clubs and whatever. And I've gotten to meet so many Indonesians, which has been such a nice feeling. Something that I hadn't experienced before cooking. And I think it's really special because it's nice to see people out here because, you know, these are my people and like they get it. They get the food. But equally, it's nice because they resonate with my practice in terms of like, how unapologetic I am about like representing our culture and whatever. But it's not even just them, because even the wider diaspora, like, my Filipino homies, my Vietnamese homies, we resonate with that message, It's like we're all kind of just a little bit tired about, having narratives being enforced upon us from the Western gaze. And I feel like that binds us all together. So yeah, that's really nice.
Yeah. Food as the great uniter.
So, when the cameras weren't rolling, guys, we have an exciting announcement.
A groundbreaking revelation. An exclusive from Rahel Stephanie. Okay?
Rahel, please can you share with us the big news?
Absolutely. So I recently did a 23andMe and I am 44.7% Filipino.
Which is so significant.
No, it's crazy. So I'm obviously majority Indonesian / North Sumatran.
Right.
So I think that comes to like 47% or something.
Yeah.
And it's 44.7% Filipino. And then the rest of it, interestingly, is South Asian and North Indian specifically. But the whole Indonesian Filipino conundrum, basically, I always knew that my North Sumatran tribe from Indonesia, the Batak tribe, we exist in the Philippines as well.
In the triangle.
Yes, exactly. But what I had always thought was just, our tribe exists, but I wasn't sure about the genetic kind of crossovers between that. And apparently we are of the same ethnic makeup. Wow. We are of the same genetic makeup. Wow, no. And so that was kind of crazy. I mean, I started texting. Yeah, I mean, I was like, I texted like all of my Filipino friends being like, guys, and everyone was just like, not surprised. Like, that makes sense. Because exactly. Yeah, so all I can say is mabuhay.
I'm inviting you around to Christmas.
Oh God. How does that make you feel? Do you feel like more connected? And like,
I mean, I've always had like loads of Filipino friends, and it makes sense. It just makes sense. Yeah. The vibes check out.
I actually love this reference.
Oh my God.
Oh my God, my cheeks.
So, to wrap things up.
Wow.
If you were to write a love letter to diaspora, cousin, what would that? What would the love letter say?
Oh man, I think it's just the same thing that I've been saying this whole time. Just, is it for yourself or is it for the Western gaze?
Damn. Mic drop.
Mic drop.
Wow. Wow. I didn't cry on this episode, but what I do feel is like galvanized.
Wow, that's a strong feeling.
Yeah. I think also because you're like a female identifying Asian person, and I don't know. I think it's so nice to be in the vicinity of someone so unapologetic.
Which is why when you kind of raised in the beginning or just before our conversation just now, and the kind of almost evolution from your first season to your second season, the kind of conversations being had.
Yeah.
I resonate a lot with that, even from like a personal growth perspective, and how I mentioned earlier that, my own relationship with my cultural identity or my relationship with identity politics has evolved and grown so much. Like, yeah.
And I think it's like hold space for the people who are just coming into their,
totally.
Oh my God, I'm in between.
Yeah.
But then the conversation has shifted.
Yeah.
And it's like, how do we go about the next iteration of these conversations? And there's room for all things on the spectrum.
Precisely.
Right?
Keep learning, growing, questioning.
Yeah. And yeah, we're all on like different journeys.
Yeah.
And I'm personally past my mango diaspora part of that journey.
I'm gonna take this off.
So what's next for you in terms of like storytelling? What other ways do you intend to like keep doing your thing outside of spoons, maybe?
Doing things like this, I think. Having these kind of conversations, which I really enjoy. And I think it's really important to be having these kind of dialogues. because outside of food, the narrative with identity is a growing one, like we've been speaking this whole time. And even with food, you know, it's beyond just defining it, like defining where it's from or defining the different dishes of Indonesia, but having more kind of extensive conversations around, you know, people's relationship with food in Indonesia in the present day, not just about tradition and ceremony, but about what it's like, how people attitudes towards foods today, their relationship with foods, and also the connection between food and land, for example, you know, having more of those kind of like nuanced explorations.
Yeah, provenance and sourcing.
Yeah, precisely.
Yeah.
Precisely.
And that's going to become a bigger conversation with climate. Anyway.
Exactly.
Let's leave it on a high. Rahel, can you please tell the people where they can find you, how they can support you, and just give them some love?
Sure. So on Instagram, it's Eat with Spoons with a 00 for the food stuff. If you're into non-food things, it's Linda from accounting. You'll find many thirst traps. I apologize in advance.
Never apologize for the thirst traps ever. I'm a big fan.
But yeah, there's a newsletter in the link in bio, and I update with like events and whatever projects I'm up to on those platforms.
Amazing. Thank you so much for your time. It's been an honor.
Thank you.
Like, we are literally just like cheering you on, championing
Thank you.
your thing, and everyone else, our Filipino sister.
Pinsan.
See. Wow.
So thank you so much, Rahel, for coming on, having such a transparent, honest, and confident conversations with us. We appreciate it so much. I've learned so much. I'm sure so has Mel. Mm-hmm. And thank you so much for tuning in to Eastern Honeys, watching, liking, subscribing. Please do all the above. Click the button.
Click the button.
Click the YouTube button.
Millennials are millennials saying, okay, boomer.
And we'll see you on the next episode. Maraming salamat.